Hey, everybody, I really wish I could be there in person to meet the fantastic patriots who are volunteer leaders of the Convention of States movement. You guys are doing an amazing job. America, obviously, is a great nation founded on principles of liberty, those principles enshrined in the Declaration of Independence, the principles that we have equal rights that are given to us by God that pre-exist government, and that government was instituted in order to protect those rights, and then enshrined in our Constitution, a constitutional framework that takes into account human frailties and human selfishness and human ambition. In Federalist 51, James Madison specifically talks about the fact that human beings aren't angels and human beings aren't devils. We're just human beings. And that means that we have to have checks and balances to prevent us from overriding the rights of our fellow citizens. And so the founders create this incredibly complex system that is designed to have a judiciary that checks an executive, that checks a legislature, and all the way back around, a legislature checking a judiciary and the executive. This entire system is built for gridlock. Why? Not because the founders didn't want to get anything done, but because the founders knew that a government that does too much is significantly more dangerous than a government that does a little bit too little. The founders also enshrined the notion of federalism, the idea that states' rights matter, that states are closer to their citizens and therefore best reflect the wants of their citizens as opposed to a giant federal government. Then, at the beginning of the 20th century, end of the 19th century, there's a grand shift in how Americans see their government. Then, the American government turns into a tool of the executive. Teddy Roosevelt, Woodrow Wilson, the progressives, they decide that we need to completely rethink how government is done. And the way government ought to be done is by consensus within the executive, by a great man at the top of government who embodies the will of the people, and his power should only be bounded by what the people want him to do. He can magically read their minds. These are the sort of words of Woodrow Wilson. We've been, since then, living more and more in Woodrow Wilson's world and less in the founders' world. We've been undermining our constitutional protections. We have turned the Constitution of the United States into, instead of a charter of liberty and a document designed to limit the power of government to its delegated powers, we have turned the Constitution into essentially a bill that allows government to do anything except for these few specific areas where we say you're kind of not allowed to do that. It's a complete reversal of what government was supposed to be. And that is why a convention of states is so necessary. And we have to educate our fellow citizens about this, because Americans have become so secure in our freedom that we've gotten complacent and ignorant. We just assume that those freedoms will always be around. After all, aren't they our birthright? Well, they aren't. Freedom has to be re-enshrined in every generation. It has to be re-inculcated. And the system that was originally designed to protect those freedoms and then perfected over the course of American history, those freedoms extended and applied to every citizen, right? That system needs to be retaught, relearned, strengthened, and bolstered. But because we didn't have to fight for our freedom, at least most of us, many of us don't actually appreciate those freedoms the way that we should. Our education in history is completely lacking. When we get to our schools, it's usually all about how America's a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad place, until the left took over and redid American government, and it's still no good, very bad, terrible place. But what we need is more leftism. The Constitution is an old, hackneyed document. We need to leave it behind, a bunch of old white slave owners. That is missing the eternal value of the Constitution, the eternal truth that the founders spoke about, the way that human nature operates, and the balances and checks and guardrails that we need in order to stop human beings from becoming tyrants. We no longer understand the proper role of government. We don't understand the need for its power to be limited. It's one of the reasons we should be alarmed by the rising popularity of socialism in America. It's a complete reversal of what people used to think government was for. Government was always to protect your rights from others. It was never to give you the ability to take things from the people who sit around you. Socialism is antithetical to America's founding principles. Not only that, it always happens to fail. So how do we stop all of this? Well, the first step is to educate our kids, right? We have to start there. It's what I do every day on my show. It's what you do every day with your kids. And it's what the Convention of States is doing. We need to remind the country of the greatness of the blueprint provided by that Constitution. We need to remind the country that the proper place of government in society is limited, not because small government is better than big government, but because government was designed in order to preserve rights, not in order to invade them. And when government invades rights, it loses its reason for being. In order to repair the damage that's been done through decades of neglect and abuse and perversion of the Constitution, we do need a convention of states to impose fiscal restraints on Washington, limit its power and jurisdiction, force it back into the confines that the founders originally envisioned, but obviously extended to protection of all citizens. It's a big vision, but Americans have always been a people of great vision. So let's get busy and let's get this done. We, the people, can reclaim and restore our republic. In fact, if we don't do it, then the republic will be lost. In every generation, we have a responsibility. That responsibility is to look back at the past, understand why the past is what it is, and then preserve that which was good while strengthening those segments that need to be shored up And that way we provide a foundation where we can build for the future. We're building that foundation for the future today. You're building that foundation for the future at the Convention of States. So thank you.